You are 3 days into the desert. Your lips have cracked. Your tongue feels thick and dry inside your mouth. There is no river. There is no well. There is no cloud in the sky. For most of human history, this was not a survival show. This was Tuesday. For roughly 200,000 years, humans lived in some of the driest, most punishing landscapes on Earth. And most of them never died of thirst. Not because water was everywhere. It wasn't. They survived because they had learned, generation after generation, how to read a landscape that looked empty and pull water out of it anyway. Today, if your tap breaks for an afternoon, it feels like a crisis. Your ancestors built entire lives around the fact that water might not show up for weeks. So how did they actually do it? Start with the most basic problem. A desert is not defined by heat. It is defined by evaporation outpacing rainfall. That means water does exist in a desert. It's just hidden, buried, or trapped somewhere the sun can't steal it. Ancient humans became experts at finding those hiding spots. And the first place they learned to look wasn't in the sand. It was underground, inside plants. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years in the 1960s living alongside the Jew/Hoansi sand people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa, one of the driest environments humans have ever called home. Lee documented something that shocked outside observers at the time. The sand weren't constantly desperate for water. They had a working system. One of their key tools was the tsama melon and a plant called the water root, a wild, moisture-swollen tuber found under otherwise dry, unremarkable-looking ground. Here's the part that sounds almost unbelievable. The sand could locate these roots from a single thin, dead-looking vine on the surface, sometimes barely thicker than a shoelace. Follow that vine down. Dig. And beneath the parched topsoil is a root the size of a small melon, packed with liquid. Squeeze it, chew it, or grate it into a cloth and wring it out. One root could provide enough moisture to keep a person going for a full day. No spring, no rain. Just knowing exactly which dead-looking plant was secretly a water tank. But finding the plant was only step one. Getting water out of the ground itself required something even stranger. And this is where the story gets genuinely wild. In parts of the Kalahari, the sand dug what researchers call sip wells. Picture a shallow hole, sometimes less than a meter deep, dug into a dry riverbed or a low patch of ground where moisture pooled just beneath the surface. Into that hole, they inserted a hollow reed or a bundle of hollow grass stems. Then, instead of drinking directly, a person would suck water up through the reed from the damp sand below, sometimes filtering it through a small wad of grass acting as a natural straw filter, and spit mouthfuls into an ostrich eggshell for storage. Ostrich eggshells sound like an oddly specific detail, but they were essential technology. A single ostrich egg holds close to a liter of liquid. Emptied, cleaned, and sealed, the shell became one of the earliest known water canteens on Earth. Archaeological sites across southern Africa, including layers at Border Cave in South Africa dating back tens of thousands of years, have turned up engraved ostrich eggshell fragments believed to be used exactly this way, sometimes even buried as hidden caches. That's right, ancient desert dwellers didn't just find water, they stashed it. Entire family groups would bury filled, sealed eggshells at known locations along their seasonal travel routes, creating something close to a personal water map buried across hundreds of square kilometers of desert. Return to that spot months later. Dig, and there's your water, waiting exactly where you left it. Now picture reconstructing a single day using this system. You wake before sunrise, when the air is coolest and your body loses the least moisture. You already know, because your parents taught you and their parents taught them, which dry riverbed nearby holds damp sand beneath its surface. You walk there while the ground is still cool. You dig, insert your reed, and slowly draw water up through it, filling shell after shell. By mid-morning, before the real heat sets in, you've hidden half of what you collected in a shallow pit marked only by a specific rock arrangement or a bent branch. Memory serving as your storage label. The rest goes with you. Later in the day, if the tsama melons are in season, you supplement with their sweet, watery flesh, eating your hydration as much as drinking it. This wasn't improvisation. It was infrastructure, just built from memory and reeds instead of pipes. Here's the counterintuitive twist. Modern people tend to imagine desert survival as a battle against scarcity, a constant emergency. But researcher James Suzman, who has spent decades studying the sand, has argued something that flips the popular narrative. In many seasons, hunter-gatherer groups in environments like the Kalahari didn't spend most of their day desperately searching for resources because they understood the landscape so precisely. Water and food gathering could take up a surprisingly small portion of daily hours, leaving considerable time for rest, storytelling, and social life. The desert wasn't necessarily a place of constant crisis. It was a system they had already solved, passed down as knowledge instead of stored as infrastructure. Halfway around the world, in the deserts of Central Australia, Aboriginal groups developed an entirely separate but equally sophisticated version of the same idea. Archaeologist Mike Smith, who has extensively studied desert occupation sites like Purujarra Rock Shelter, has documented how Aboriginal communities relied on networks of what are known as soaks, natural depressions where groundwater rose close enough to the surface to be reached by digging, often marked and maintained across generations as reliable water points along known travel routes. These weren't random discoveries. They were mapped, named, and embedded in oral tradition and songlines, cultural knowledge systems that encoded the location of water sources across vast stretches of desert, sometimes passed down for thousands of years. In other words, before satellite maps, before GPS, entire deserts were already mapped, stored not on paper, but inside human memory and story. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. None of this required advanced technology. No wells with pumps. No plumbing. Just observation, memory, and an intimate, inherited relationship with a landscape most modern humans would look at and see nothing but sand. And here's the mirror. Today, if you're thirsty, you turn a handle and water appears, so reliably that you probably haven't thought about where it comes from in years. That convenience represents something extraordinary, but it also represents a kind of forgetting. Your ancestors carried an entire operational map of survival in their heads, encoded in stories about a bent branch or a strange, dead-looking vine. You carry none of that, not because you're less capable, but because you've never needed to. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it stopped being necessary, somewhere in your own biology. Though, the thirst response is exactly the same one that sent a person crawling toward its Sama melon 200,000 years ago. Your body still remembers what your mind has forgotten. You are 3 days into the desert, and this time, you know exactly where to dig.